When it comes to Fat Shark games, you can assume the combat will be great. In the case of Vermintide 2, the melee combat was something that really grabbed a hold of me when I first started playing. It honestly was the hook that kept me around long enough to enjoy the rest of the game. So when it comes to Darktide, we do have some huge changes to the combat system that I think lots of you will enjoy, especially for those of you who are FPS fanatics. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm Vulkan, and today we are diving headfirst into the brutal world of Warhammer 40k. In Darktide, players will assume the role of a reject who comes equipped with their own preferred weapons, like the Zealot who caves in skulls with a Thunderhammer, or the Veteran who goes all Marcus Phoenix on enemies with his chainsword. But whichever way you slice it, the game has a variety of weapons to choose from, and today we're going to break down how combat works in Darktide. So in gameplay so far, each character has one ranged weapon and one melee weapon equipped. Now, it's not known if we can swap these to double up on a single type, like having two guns or two chain swords, or if that's a forced restriction to help keep things balanced. So let's get things started with a list of all of the weapons that we know about so far and how they perform. So number one is the Ogryn knife. Now, we see this in almost every piece of key art. It's very front and center when showing Ogryn gameplay. This is basically a huge knife. It's way too large for a human to use, but for an Ogryn, it's more like a Bowie knife. It works just like a typical knife as well. You can block with it, you can slice up enemies, you can do all sorts of knife things with this particular weapon. Now, our second weapon is the chainsword. Now, this is an absolute icon in the 40k universe. And honestly, this was the weapon that got me interested in 40k in the first place. This futuristic sword functions as you would imagine any regular sword. It cuts through enemies, it leaves them in pieces, it lacerates, it does all of the sword things that you would imagine. But if you really want to do some serious damage, you can activate the saw portion of the weapon to completely butcher anything in your way, and it looks and sounds fantastic. And speaking of brutal melee weapons, we have the Thunderhammer next. Now, this one is another weapon that was augmented to completely maximize pain in every way possible. Not only is it basically a sledgehammer meant to shatter bones and souls, but you can also activate its secondary effect to infuse electricity into every single swing, making it even more potent for clearing space. So those are all of the melee weapons we know about so far, but honestly guys, if I was a gambling man, I would say we have a few more out there we don't know about yet, like the power sword, for instance. But with Darktide being a ranged heavy game, we have more weapons to talk about that let us mow down hordes of enemies. Now, first up is the lasgun. This has been shown off with the Veteran. It's a semi-automatic laser rifle that comes with a hollow sight and is perfect for lining up headshots and inflicting some serious damage if you have the right aim. Now, the one big downside to this gun is that while it excels at range, it really becomes a liability up close. So if you plan on taking this one with you into battle, make sure to bring a nice melee weapon. Now, second, we have the auto gun. Now, where the las gun does well at range and falters in close quarters, the auto gun excels at neither. It seems to be more of a balanced approach. It's fully automatic. It appears to be great for more medium ranged mayhem. This was shown with the Zealot and comes equipped with iron sights. Next up is the Ripper gun. Now, this one's interesting because it actually has two firing modes, full auto and semi-auto, which honestly semi-auto works more like a shotgun. So full auto is as it sounds. It lets you chunk away at hordes of enemies. It does extremely well at culling hordes, and honestly, low-level targets really don't stand a chance with this one. But according to the developer, this gun does tend to stall out when fighting armored opponents. The developer then goes on to say this is a good example of when another teammate who is better equipped to take on armored enemies needs to step in and be able to handle the situation, whereas the Ripper gun wielder can turn back towards the horde and continue mowing down low-level enemies. Now, like I mentioned, there's an alternative firing mode for the Ripper gun, and that's the semi-auto mode. Now, this one does still fall short of dealing with armored enemies, but it gives you a little more control over where your shots go. Honestly, from the gameplay, this one looks like more how a shotgun would perform. So those are all of the weapons we know about so far, but with the 40k universe, you can assume that we will also see bolters and plasma guns at some point in time, maybe even flamethrowers. But whatever we have in store, I'm very excited to see the tools of destruction that will come with the final game. But melee and ranged weapons aren't the only ways that you can fight heresy. You also have access to career skills and different types of grenades. So for grenades, we know of two types so far: fragmentation grenade and the flame grenade. Now, frag grenades will explode like usual, sending shrapnel everywhere, while fire grenades will paint an area in burning flames, which is perfect for rushing enemies. Now, so far, we've seen rejects be able to carry two of a single type of grenade. So the guess here is that you won't be able to carry multiple types. Instead, you'll need to choose between the two. And throughout missions, you're going to find ammo and grenade crates to refill your reserves, and these appear to be pretty plentiful. So that really is a big encouragement for players to go out and just go ballistic with all the ordnance. Don't feel like you have to hang on to these things forever. Just throw them all over the place and have a great time. So that's grenades. Now let's talk about skills. So just like in Vermintide, each reject will have a skill that can be used and then will recharge over time. Now these skills are themed around each class, and they do a pretty good job of fitting their role in the party. So the Ogren's skill is a bull rush, which knocks down enemies, and this very much opens them up to a nice ground and pound session with melee weapons, allowing you to clean up things pretty easily. Now the Veteran has enhanced vision, which highlights targets and gives bonus damage to armor. The Psyker and Zealot have not been confirmed, but we do have gameplay of what we believe to be their skills. So the Psyker can crush enemies by using their warp powers, and the Zealot has a very quick extended dodge to get out of harm's way. Now these all seem to be very straightforward. Their value is very easy to interpret in terms of combat, and I should also note that each reject will have their own talent tree, which helps augment their skill. So these may be baseline that we've seen so far, they might be enhanced. We truly don't know from the early footage that we have. Now recently, Skillup posted a video that showcases some new gameplay from a recent hands-on session that he had in June. Now again, this is early footage, but I did want to talk about the UI as well as some of the things that I noticed for combat. So one, the UI seems to be much more data-rich than previous games. Here you have party frames displaying the status of each party member. The bottom right-hand corner shows your weapons, your ordnance, and your reserves. The skill button is right there next to your weapons, which will show recharging or whether it's fully charged. You have a mission tracker in the upper right-hand corner. And then lastly, there's a stamina bar that'll appear when you sprint or dodge. Now this depletes very, very fast, and it looks like it's not something meant to be used all of the time, but rather an emergency situation. So overall, I mean, the UI looks good, right? It's not overly innovative, but it does get the job done. Now, there is one other thing I did want to highlight, and those are tags for enemies. So these can be used to help draw focus to particularly dangerous enemies, so that way your party can kill them off quickly. In addition to that, there's also a lot of visual indicators to help you locate key items, ammo and grenade crates, and more. So overall, this just looks like a big improvement over what we had in Vermintide, and honestly, I can't wait for it. Plus the 40k theme looks fantastic. From weapons to the skills and everything in between, Darktide looks like it's shaping up to be a real contender when it releases later this year. Now for me, I'm just excited to explore the 40k universe in an FPS rather than a strategy game or an isometric action RPG. And honestly guys, this setting is one of my favorites, and I truly hope Darktide gives us something to remember. So folks, that is all for today. I appreciate the support, and if you want more Darktide content, please share, like, and subscribe. Thank you, and as always, this has been Vulkan, and I will talk to you guys next time.